Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Gamer Talk podcast. Anthony and Chris are my guests today. It's kind of a tradition with Anthony to have him around before Christmas, and now he brought Chris Hunter with him. And yeah, happy to have you, and happy to see you again, Anthony. After one how do I say it? After one rocky year and wild year in the industry, it's great to have you guys back on here.
That's good to be back, and nice to bring Chris along as a little gift for everyone.
Yeah,
to
thanks
get
for
some
having me.
extra
Appreciate
insight. But yes, 2025, which we'll probably dig into now between the three of us, has been quite the year for game development in lots of ways. And
Yeah, you could say that.
Nice. Yes, to give a short introduction, Chris Hunter has joined us alongside Anthony O'Donnell. Chris Hunter is the lead artist at the D3T, and Anthony is working as an art director at D3T. As I said, I had him on here many times, and we shared different insights of the industry and how things have changed, and maybe some of our futuristic sites or ideas in the past. Maybe they came true and maybe they didn't come true. But yeah, Anthony, give us a rundown. How was your year? How was it for you in game dev, co-dev, I'd say?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think at a very, very high level, which will reach out to other topics in a minute anyway, that in co-development it's been a year of many clients pausing projects, stopping projects, changing projects, delaying projects because of that big elephant in the room that is GTA 6. There's been a lot of change through 2025, which obviously has resulted in a lot of pressures on the business and companies, and like layoffs worldwide, which we'll probably touch upon. But for me, it also resulted in a role change because we've had studio changes at this studio, which meant I've been thrown in as head of art for the last 6 months. So I'm doing my usual art director duties, but also now have a different view on the running of the studio from that point of view. So that's changed my 2025 midway. There's like a midway swing while trying to keep everything going.
So you got now more like an art director already has the big picture of art in mind for a specific game, and now it's even more from a studio perspective.
Studio, yes,
and I see.
Yeah, so it's more departmental, making sure the studio is running well across all projects, which I kind of did a lot of that anyway as a project level in terms of the work. But now it's more about like team shapes, costs, and just the running of the studio day to day, which is a very, very different thing than I've dealt with in the past. So obviously Louise Andrew, our previous head of art, has stood up to be studio head. So she's now studio head of D3T. So due to that, I've stood up to take the head of art, at least for now, until we figure out what to do next to keep everything moving, which it's been really good. It's been really interesting change where just when the industry was getting a bit crazy with a lot of the happenings on projects and everything, to have that change mid-year has been different and unexpected, but it has given me a different point of view on the business side of game dev actually, and on what it takes to run a team and to deal with the problems 2025 has thrown at everybody in terms of resource shifting and having to balance teams out, and it's been quite difficult to get a handle on this year. But one thing I will say is earlier in the year, even D3T themselves had project cancellations and changes, projects finishing, none starting again. So there's been a lot of kind of pressure on us as a studio, other co-dev studios in the Keywords group, and generally just friends who work at other studios globally to find work. It's been one of the hardest things because of the AI investment and everything, because of a lot of companies changing their dates, as mentioned, whether it was to actually avoid GTA 6 or not. It's created a lot of teams to run budgets leaner, longer, rather than bigger and now, which was what was happening earlier in 25. So a lot of the year changed how projects were structured, which has put a lot of pressures on the actual business side of stuff for a lot of studios globally, which has been really interesting to see from this point of view than what I'd normally observe.
So what was the business strategy then for D3T to come through these times, or to get through these times as in the most in the most positive way as it is now? Like what have been some decisions you guys need to take, or is there some structure shifting inside the company to not lay off people and to keep the ball rolling. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been lots of kind of internal reflection on how we do things, how we represent ourselves from a sales point of view as a group and as a studio and a team. A lot of it has been looking at what we're actually really good at, what sets us apart from other studios. What we can't do is as important as what we can do. Because one thing I'm not afraid to say is we're not a bandwidth company. We're not like hundreds of people. At the moment, we're around 150 plus developers. So we're not going to be as big as like a 500 dev outsourced studio. So it's being a lot more clear on what we offer clients and what we bring to the table has been a big thing this year to deal with exactly what you're saying, to kind of shift to these changing demands so clients know exactly when to come to us and why. But we have seen a good uptick in the last kind of 2 months. There's been a lot more interest because I think mid-year there wasn't that much work going around, so we were pitching for everything. Like I myself have done with the team over 30-something pitches this year, chasing different projects and leads and work, and a lot of it goes nowhere or to find somebody else or whatever. There's different reasons each time. So it's been a lot of competition, I think, throughout the year with other co-dev studios and outsourced studios across the globe. So that's been an interesting aspect of figuring out how do we deal with that, because you can't just necessarily be cheaper because you're competing against maybe foreign markets that have lower cost of living. AI investment has thrown a lot of stuff under the bus, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, that's the big one for us, I think, is just a lot of inner reflection and just rethinking of how we position ourselves and represent ourselves, which a lot of work has been done on that front over the last few months, and now I think we're in a better place for it. So all the current kind of pitches and approaches to clients were a lot more unified and clear in our offering and what we do. So obviously I'm desperately trying not to break NDAs or secrets there, but that's kind of where it is for that. It's been a lot of that, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know if Chris has felt any of that during the year, but
exactly that's what I've been up to ask. Because now we heard from Anthony, we heard the bigger business side of things, but how is it from like the down in the trenches art side of things for Chris? So how has been the year for you? Did you need to see, or did you need to have different approaches for your art or for the artists you are leading? Like how was the whole situation for you guys?
I think for me, it's been quite interesting because obviously, as a lead, I tend to look after teams rather than do things myself individually. So there's been a lot of sort of reassurance or trying to help people out when it comes to worrying about the current situation of things or how they can prepare for things or how they can adapt to, currently sort of changing circumstances and stuff like that throughout the industry. So it's definitely been an interesting challenge because it's not the usual kind of, lead or line management type stuff that's been happening. It's been a bit more extreme than other years in general, industry wide. So obviously it's only natural that people get worried about things and how they deal with stuff that happens or that could potentially happen. So there's been a lot of that kind of stuff. But I think overall, like project wise, it's been a lot of people just getting their head down, focusing on things, trying to make sure that we're doing the best we can with with what we've got and the time we have and all that kind of stuff. And just really, obviously we're always doing our best, but I think people have really been feeling the, not pressure, but sort of feeling the need to not prove themselves, but what I mean? Sort of everybody's kind of trying to justify what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's been good to sort of see that kind of passion in people where, it's a kind of a hard, what's the word? It's a hard landscape at the moment, industry wide. So I think people have that kind of inert fear about, if I don't shine, what's going to happen? And it's been an interesting experience to see that from the side of team leadership when you start to see sort of small competitions emerge almost amongst the team, not negatively, not in like a I'm better than them kind of way, but more of a let's keep everybody polished, let's keep everyone at the top of the game. Let's make sure that should anything ever come up, there's no excuses. We're doing all that kind of stuff. So it's been quite interesting, and also just workload wise and stuff. Like for me personally, it's been a very interesting year for personal development when it comes to how I lead and that kind of stuff. Because I've been leading now for a couple of years, I think, but the project I'm currently on is quite different to the last one. So things change, between projects, and the way you tackle stuff changes, and the way you approach the way you tackle stuff changes. So it's an ever evolving position to be in. So I think during times of difficulty like this past year, everyone's been kind of scared of everything. It's really helped me kind of prove to myself that I am as adaptable as I was hoping to be, in the sense of things haven't kind of crumbled. Things are still going. People are still, happy at work, and they're still trying to do the best they can, and they're still trying to constantly improve. And I'm quite happy with the progress that everybody's made, and the stuff we've got to show for at the end of it is really an example of that.
Has there been some idle time when you guys didn't have any work and you just try to improve new workflows, maybe tried out different programs, just to keep us well equipped as a company for the future? Has there been some internal workshops, I'd say?
Workshops, I wouldn't say. Well, yeah, actually, there's been some stuff like that, but I think we do have an internal project that we use to sort of keep people going, keep the engines moving, so that nobody's ever really got any full-on idle time. If they are sort of in between projects, or if they're even just in between milestones, sometimes they just need to keep something polished, or they need to brush up on something else. We have an internal project that's kind of designed for that, to showcase what the team can do. As Andy was saying before about pitch things and stuff like that, it's good to have this kind of thing available to show people as well for pitches, because obviously being a co-development studio, we are locked behind a lot of different NDAs. So when it comes to pitching for work, we can't be saying to people, oh, we're working on this thing, which is kind of similar, or we've worked in this style, which your game is also, whereas instead we've got this we've got this internal project, which kind of allows us to showcase the abilities and the skill sets of everybody, and to polish them as well, because there's a lot of emerging technologies that have been coming about throughout the years. I don't just mean like AI stuff, but I mean like nanite and that kind of thing. Getting used to the workflow of how that actually works, because it is more than just clicking the nanite box and saying it's done. There's a lot more to it than to use it. So it's a really good way of kind of proving out methodologies and pipelines and techniques that the team can utilize at any point. So that's been really useful.
Yeah, because that's definitely one good example with nanite and stuff, because I was going to actually raise the UB5 feature set as a general thing that still catches teams and studios out and projects, that a lot of people use it but don't know how to really use it, and then it ends up causing a lot of problems later down the line when they realize a lot of content was made incorrectly to really leverage the power. So I am definitely, since all the learning and training we've done on it, I think about 5 projects in now on nanite and lumen, that kind of tech, and we've seen it used multiple different ways by different studios and teams, and from all of that there were learnings, good and bad, as to how to use the tech well. So that's one of the little things I was doing with the team leading up to this week, actually, is canvassing the team to get all that accumulated knowledge across all the projects and across everyone's learnings across the team. So even though it wasn't done as a workshop, it's part of my role to kind of almost cast a net out to the team every few months and then soak up all of that institutionalized accumulated knowledge. So then we get that and break it down into a best practices page for nanite that we all understand. How much do you need to subdivide a mesh to be useful for clustering? How does the overdraw work better if you actually do the cutting in solid modeling as a watertight meshes as opposed to having floaters? Are floaters okay? There's a lot of these little things some studios have taken too seriously, some have taken not seriously enough, and you end up with extremes then of some meshes that are just really not performant in nanite and some that work really extremely well. So I think we kind of learn on the job a lot of the time, but as Chris mentioned, do have the internal project. So if someone does have downtime, which I most certainly did not this year, if someone does have downtime, then we'd get them to do 2 things usually. It's either bolstering the skill set they have and kind of increasing that and upgrading it to level it up to get better at a certain job, whether it's making props or whatever it might be. But then we have other people who, career developmentally wise, want to move into lighting or VFX or move into concept or move into kind of level art. So then we use this internal project or similar to then allow them and facilitate them a resource. And it's obviously set up in Perforce. It's like a real project. Everything's there for them. They can leverage everything that's being done already to work towards developing their skills that way. So yeah, I want to see more of that in 2026 if folks can get to it. But a lot of it is down to, as you said, the idleness, which unlike potentially what I remember being in full development in-house at studios, you do get these peaks and troughs throughout development. If the rest of the team is in pre-production, the art team might not necessarily be in production, so you'll be doing benchmarks and other things. Where co-development, it's literally, if you're not busy, you're probably going to be on something else immediately because someone else needs something else. So downtime is not as common, but when it is, yeah, we tend to try and use it well to not have people truly idle. It'll be doing one of those aforementioned things.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned nanite because it's still one of those buzzwords. I think nanite is now over 5 years old, and it's still when you speak of nanite, it's still making in my mind. It's like it's easy. It's just throw in sub D because
it's not that simple.
Because the presentation back then was selling it so easy, and it's just in a click of a button, and you can import right away from ZBrush, and it applies the materials, and everything looks fine, and it's performant. And
the show made it look that way.
I think that's the ultimate catch, right? It's not
exactly. It still has this thing in my mind when you guys mention nanite.
I think when it comes to sort of small personal projects or just making beauty corners and that kind of stuff, then sure, you can use it like that. That's whatever. But when it comes to actual production usage, things that are outside of like real time film sets and that kind of stuff, I forget what's virtual production.
Virtual production, yeah. It works really well for that.
It works really well for virtual production. You can just sort of throw stuff in, change things on a whim to align with the art direction or what the director's after. That's great. But when it comes to game development and real-time usage, on a wider scale, it's just simply not the case. There's a lot more to it.
There's the other element as well that now you have the Steam Decks, you have other handhelds coming out like the Microsoft one, you have obviously Switch 2 is a thing. So that technology, feature set, i.e. Nanite Lumen, all these things, they don't necessarily scale the same way to those platforms. So we're living in a weird industry now where going into 2026, if clickbait articles are to be believed, NVIDIA and other manufacturers of chips are going to be making less, RAM is going to be less. Do the hardware generation upgrades that we normally get around year 7 and 8, are they going to be pushed out beyond? If so, we're stuck in an ecosystem now where we're going to have PS5, PS5 Pro, Series X, Series S, the handhelds, and Switch 2. If you then have to make a game to be profitable and get as much market reach as possible by having it in all platforms, then you really need to be careful of how you build your assets with tech like this. Because PS5, Series X and PS5 Pro and stuff will very likely, at least at 30 frames a second, run quite a lot with Nanite and Lumen and without as much care for optimizing it. But if you then want to put that on a Switch 2 as an example, not that simple.
No. You really don't want to be using fallback meshes and stuff like that. It just looks awful.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to be a lot cleaner with everything. So I think that's where the industry is actually, while one way the likes of Unreal 5 and all these feature sets and virtualized geometry are running way ahead, I'm actually starting to see a limit to what is actually feasible based on the hardware that's on the market, rather than your PC that can do these great things because you have a 50 series card and like 120 gigs of RAM. And that's where I think the industry is going to struggle, or has struggled during 2025, that we're finding productions have changed from a usual 3 to 5 year production cycle. Many productions have changed from 5 to 8 years now. And that's starting to become a bit untenable, which I think is why we're getting the kind of pressures on the business we didn't have before, because everything's getting more expensive to make. I would argue, do we have to make everything that high fidelity? Really? Just because it exists, do we really need to do it? And that's what I would question as a big one for 2026 for a lot of studios, is really to think about, because I pull out Arc Raiders as a great example here. They came out and didn't use any of it, and that's a great game. And that's doing really well, and it performs brilliantly, and it looks great. So I'd like to see, at least in 26, is a better consideration for art direction and setting limits for projects, credible, realistic limits, instead of trying to aim for the most highest fidelity, hyper real, stick your nose inside a detail on a rock. Is that really the gaming experience we should be creating for people versus just making a well art directed good game?
This could be like the the cure for all the hardware escalation we had in the last few months, I'd say, where the RAM prices are going up like crazy and GPU prices are going up like crazy. So this could be the counter argument that, as you say, do we really need those high-end gaming PCs? Do we really need those high-end realistic graphics? As long as as you said, as long as the game is good and it runs well, I'm pretty fine with my old system. And as long as it's fun to play. We're still playing games to have fun and not just to count every pixel on our. On our
I think it's kind of a hangover of the. I don't want to say it too literally, but I guess I will. But it's like the PlayStation days, right? You remember when PlayStation were very much graphics focused? They still are. But PlayStation at one point during PS3 and PS4 eras, it was all about the visuals. It was all about the visuals over anything else. And obviously Nintendo did the opposite of that, where they're like, no, we're just going to make great games. And I think, in a way, by PlayStation chasing that visual fidelity and beautiful games like Uncharted, like The Last of Us, which they absolutely really hit a high watermark, kind of benchmark, then they'd gotten that followed up by the likes of Epic and others developing tools to go even further, and then you get this kind of +1ing and this one-upping. And I think we've just hit this peak level of ability where, or at least the hardware ability to render this stuff, where now teams are almost losing the skill sets of how to build efficient content to get it onto these other platforms.
Because it was not needed, right?
Yeah, and it's diverged so much now that if you take like a Series S and a Switch 2 and a Steam Deck, which are like on the lower end, and then you hold it to the higher end like a PS5 Pro and high-end PC, that distance is so big now compared to what it used to be.
Yeah,
the way everything's advanced and hardwares have changed, it's making game dev very complicated, I think.
Yeah, the chase for fidelity completely outshone the chase for making a good game at a certain point, I think. So you still got some, like you said, the PlayStation ones, like, the God of Wars and the Uncharted's, where the story is what carries them, and the fidelity is also there, but it's a smaller, more succinct, focused game that's like 30 hours or whatever it is, and it's a relatively reasonable dev cycle. It's not the shortest, but it's not GTA 6,
but what I find fascinating is that Ghost of Tsushima is a good outlier to that, because they didn't necessarily chase fidelity, but they have great tech and the game itself runs and feels great, but they also focused on more of a painterly, stylistic look.
Yeah,
where it's
exactly.
very different. So
they've
like done a great job.
With the right art direction and the right game design, you don't need to focus on fidelity. I mean, as an example of something kind of similar, not fidelity-wise, I guess, but I've recently been playing a lot of Expedition 33 because played it when it came out, absolutely loved it, and then I left it for a bit, and then I went back to New Game Plus and I've been playing it more, and it just reminded me of how sort of stunning the art direction is, and the gameplay and the story, and everything sort of ticks all the boxes. It's not a super long game. It didn't have a super long dev cycle, and it didn't really have a super huge team. So it was pretty impressive to get all of that from those kind of different categories. You can achieve a lot, I think, if you focus more on what the game is and not specifically how it looks. Although in that example, it does also look awesome, but that wasn't the driving factor. The driving factor was the fact that you enjoy playing it, the fact that you care about the characters and you care about the world. You're trying to sort of save the world because you like it, not because it looks really, really nice. I think that's kind of a focal point we need to try and get back towards, making really solid gameplay. And like you said with Nintendo, for example, they've always focused on gameplay first, like fidelity second. Look at any Nintendo game and you'll see that, they still look good, but in their own way. They don't look like, they're not high fidelity, but they do look good. And
they also have good tech as well. I think that's obviously down to the hardware. They want to make it as good as it can be. Like, look at Metroid Prime 4, and it runs like 120 hertz on the Switch 2. Like, it's really, really smooth.
Yeah.
Can you name any reasons why like studios and teams are looking for the high fidelity? Maybe is it easier to make a good game to or what's like or is it just the race to the top of high fidelity? Like what's the reason why maybe people or studios forgot how good games work?
I think personally it was probably a chase for kind of the consumer approval for what looks good and what doesn't. Like I think a lot of the sort of FPS community, for example, things went from being about really solid gameplay with games
PC
like Counter-Strike.
guys.
Yeah, so it's stuff like every time a new Call of Duty comes out, it's like, oh, this looks so good, and then a new Battlefield will come out, this looks even better, and then a new Call of Duty, this looks so good, and then it kind of escalated and escalated. But then it got to a point where they all look as good because you can't really look much better for that kind of game. And now the gameplay is suffering as a result because you're just trying to constantly cram more and more ways of it looking more realistic in, rather than looking at ways of improving the gameplay or improving the campaign, for example, or something like that, or lack thereof at times.
Absolutely.
So I think that's partly what's to do with it, and also it's probably also the fact that new technology emerges, studios want to push it, and then people with the purse strings and stuff at the top hear the buzzwords and want to throw that into the game, and then before you know it, you've then got this escalation of technology trying to catch up with the vision, and then they don't always coalesce. So you often end up in this kind of situation where you're stuck in a dev cycle of a game that possibly won't do well because it doesn't have the elements that it needs. It looks amazing, but it might not have the other stuff. But the people who are funding it know that you're using Nanite, for example, or you're using AI, or you're using whatever the current buzzword is. And that then becomes the focus of the development rather than the actual game itself.
Yeah, I mean, ray tracing was that for the last couple of years, right? The first thing you'd be asked is, does your game have ray tracing? And it doesn't make it any better.
60 FPS ray tracing, it's rubbish.
I think that's where a lot of it could be what you said, Chris. It's the investment side, it's execs, and you kind of have to do it to show you're being ambitious and you're pushing. But this is where I still think that's an almost outdated hangover from when graphics during the PS2, PS3, and PS4 era, like 7, 8, 9, that they were the big thing, that graphics really did sell consoles. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think there's such a level playing field now between the consoles, arguably handhelds aside, or pseudo handhelds, but mostly a lot of the PS5s and Series X are very comparable, that there's not that much in it. And I know console war folks hate to hear that, but really they're both just glorified PCs at best, and not even good glorified PCs. But they're very capable pieces of hardware. But I see that almost going away. And maybe this drive then for visuals and fidelity will also go away, because I have this long since held belief, and I probably would have mentioned it almost last year as well on the podcast potentially, is I don't think gameplay has improved at the same rate as the push has been for fidelity and everything else. And now we're worried about pushing AI to make it all go faster and higher fidelity, cheaper and better, and all these great investment bro ideas. The problem is, though, the focus is still not, is it a good game? And that'd be the first thing I'd always ask myself when we look at projects or go to pitch on a project. The first thing in my mind is not, does it look good? Not, does the art direction excite me? It's like, is it a good game? Is there something to it that helps it stand out? Or are the 3Cs implemented really well, that it's smooth and a good experience? I'm more focused on that aspect. And if that core is correct, then you're building somewhere good. Exactly. And I think that's where the industry really, I think the industry really needs to go. If it was me, not that I have control of any multi-million-dollar budget, but if I were to start a games company in a game tomorrow, I would start with the lightest team possible, focus purely on the gameplay prototypes, not even touch visuals, and just spend the first year in development just sorting out the 3Cs, the scope, block out, do all of that legwork first. And it's actually, I was watching a documentary over the weekend, which on YouTube, I can share the link with you guys, but it was about Akira, or techniques that gave Akira its look and quality. Unprecedented Quality is the name of the video. And one thing they discussed in it is the director for Akira actually storyboarded the entire movie first. And obviously it was the same creator of the manga, so he'd created the manga first anyway, but there's over 2,000 storyboards done prior to them even beginning production fully on the movie. And I think that's a lesson games have forgot, that games now just throw massive teams at things to try and move quickly, but without getting that foundation, as Chris mentioned a second ago. I think that's the key point here, is if you get that foundation right in your gameplay, in your scope, in your vision, and you kind of know where you're going, you can then scale successfully and deliver something that actually works. And I'm pretty sure that's how Expedition 33 probably would have done it, is they, even though they probably did it in a more loose, not as linear way, is they got the foundation right first and really figured out over their 6-ish year development cycle what they were doing and what made the game stand out and what was important, and then probably through full production at it to kind of up-res everything and get it to where it needed to be to ship. And I think that's where watching the Art Dirctor documentaries, not watched them all yet, but they kind of had a similar ethos. I know there's a big change halfway through and had to kind of stop and go, actually, no, this is not what we wanted to do. We wanted to do something else. It's been able to do that. It's easier earlier in production than to do it near the end. And that's how games get frozen or cancelled. It's if you've spent too much money and you no longer have enough money to undo what you've done.
Yeah, you can't pivot, can you?
Something
Once
just
you've
stalls
so
out.
much into it.
Exactly.
But if it's still in the early stages, you've got time to turn it around.
Exactly. I think that's where game development really needs to re-look at how games are made, because they are more expensive. They do take more time. Personally, I feel a lot of that time is wasted by going in loops during the middle of production when you've not got your foundation right, rather than taking it a bit slower and putting in less investment up front and capping that investment at a certain point to really focus on the core idea that you need and then proceed into production, because you don't want to make a mistake at that point. And I know that's an idealistic view and games aren't like that, and you do find a lot of stuff throughout development as you go. I get that, but I do think folks need to really consider development practices. And to me, that's what's one of the aspects that has hurt the industry in the last couple of years with layoffs and with stuff getting cancelled. It's because these foundations were not firm. Investment then dried up, and then it just collapses. Where games that had a firm foundation and were almost there would tend to make it across the finish line, versus ones that were just chaos and then they just had to cut it to get rid of sinking more money into it, that kind of thing.
But do you guys see studios pivoting to the approach Anthony just laid out, to focus more on the basis? And because from now, also with the whole AI stuff happening, it looks like people want to go even faster and faster.
That's my concern.
Shorter development cycles, easier return of investment, like always faster. And
I don't think that works. Right? That's just going to degrade the quality and make things even more homogenized and generic, and you're just going to get more content quicker and not quality content better.
That's it.
More slop.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the issue is that people are trying to race towards a goal, but the problem is nobody's established what the goal is. So they're all just trying to get stuff done now and do it as quickly as possible with the most efficient tooling that is just churning out stuff that's already been made elsewhere in a slightly different format. But along the way, nobody's saying that what is the end goal? Like, what are we trying to create? Why is it special? What makes it unique? What makes it enjoyable? So I think that's one of the main issues I've got with all the kind of the push for like AI tooling and stuff at the moment. Some of it is probably okay in certain situations, so your placeholders or mood boards or whatever it might be. But even then, I mean, it's not something to be relied on. It's not something to be used as a main mechanic or a main tool for the team to use to try and get to the end result. It's something to be used to save the mundanity, not the creativity. So think, for example, I saw a pretty good retopology tool that's being utilized. I think it was a Blender plugin using AI or something to do it. And it retopologized a face in a couple of seconds. That face had already been made by the person, and they chose guidelines for it and then told it, go fix that, and it fixed it. Cool. That kind of thing, that makes sense to use if you're trying to save some time and, you've got control over it. Whereas saying, just type in a prompt in, show me a final boss for my RPG game, and then handing that to a team saying, make that's our boss. Like, that's just stupid. But you do see that sometimes with that kind of mentality of, well, this can do it, so why shouldn't it? And then it comes out and people don't like it because it's AI slop or, whatever terminology they use. And then that would then get blamed on the studio, which would then get shut by the people with the purse strings. And then, it becomes this vicious cycle of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where, and it all ends up coming back to the beginning saying, we told you so, and that's not really a useful thing to have. But the problem is that because everybody's doing it at the same time with this current kind of trend, it means that we're not getting the opportunity to reflect on previous mistakes because everybody's making them at the same time. So I think with everyone jumping on board at the same time to these buzzwords that come out, it means that you then get a group of sort of, not necessarily flops, but you get a group of products that come out that are less than, of a less than reasonable quality or less than desirable quality, should I say. And then you then get stuck in a situation where that's then tarred the reputation of the studio or the publisher or whoever was involved, when it's not really usually their fault to a certain degree. And it just becomes quite unfair. Whereas if we chase something being great, like you said earlier about blocking something out, using the block out as the main mechanic of how we improve this game, like, because if it's enjoyable to play a block out And if it's enjoyable to read a script or an overview of a game, that's when you've got a good situation to be in. That's when you've got a good product that you know your team's going to enjoy making. They're going to be passionate about it. They're going to try the best with it. They're not just going to be sat in like a sort of 9-to-5 situation of just churning out some AI stuff. It's a very different industry. Like this, we don't work in factory work, where we know what's going in, we know what's coming out. It's a very creative process that we do, and a lot of things do change in between from A to B. But the point of us artists is that we can adapt and change based on what is happening during development. Whereas when you're using tools like that, you can't really adapt. It's sort of, this is what you've got. This is what we churned out. Go use that. And it just doesn't work that way. You need to be flexible.
Yeah, I think the speed of that technology and the models growing will make it adaptable at some point. I think that's the other thing here, is that a lot of, and even the way you refer to it as AI tooling, in your mind, you already see it that way, where other people want it as an AI make game button. And that's a very clear distinction that needs clarifying.
Yeah.
I think AI tools, if you will, are probably very beneficial to game development to help teams get stuff done efficiently. And there are probably ways to do that effectively, but I don't feel enough investment is in that aspect of AI development as a useful thing. Instead, a lot of it is just generative AI or how to do something faster, quicker to get out the door, whether it's just video processing or I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the Elon Musk always shares or retweets the kind of games done with AI and it's all just generated on the fly. It's like, that's not a good experience because it's not going to feel smooth. You're not going to get nice feedback and interactions.
It's just white noise, isn't it?
There's so much of it missing. And so many elements that are not actually factored into that. It looks nice as a visual, and yes, it creates a hyper real, nice visual, and yes, it's impressive that it can do it at runtime and all that kind of stuff, but it's lacking that systemic behaviors that are all underneath that game to actually make the game. And I think that's where AI is just running so far ahead. It's not thinking about the behind the scenes elements. They're just trying to fix the visual element, which is not necessarily something that needs fixing, because you can always scale that, as you were saying earlier, to be whatever you have in your budget and time and resource. I think that's what a lot of people kind of chase the wrong thing. And to me, that's like almost an extension of what we said previously, what I said about the PlayStation thing, where they were chasing visuals in that generation. That was the most important thing during the console wars. Now, the AI investment is chasing the visuals to the nth degree, when actually they're missing the woods for the trees, where there's a game that's missing here, this whole conversation. And some of the videos are really impressive that we often even share them between ourselves, like me and Chris and others, where you'd find a fun video or someone put it online as they did with Sora or Nano Banana or whatever. And it's like, it's great. It's funny. It's, it's a video and it's a novelty. But I think like a lot of your headlines I've seen this week is a lot of the big companies who are investing in AI are not seeing returns to match what they're investing. And I reckon at some point that's going to have to be balanced. And that's one concern I have for 2026 is if we're locked into the hardware that we have due to AI and data centers, if we're then going to be under pressure, because a lot of us work for companies directly or indirectly who, because they're platform holders, who have invested heavily in AI. If these AI dreams and aspirations don't work out, where do we think the cost saving is going to happen? So I am concerned about that for me going into 2026, that the reality is if that doesn't pay off in some way, then someone's going to get hurt somewhere along the line.
It's always something when I speak with friends about like being unemployed, looking for a job, and they ask me, is like AI replacing your job, and is this the reason why you don't find anything because AI is already doing your job? And long term, no, it's not AI like doing my job, but it's like where the money flows. It's
that's the problem.
Like that's where like they are not, people with money are not investing in like new game projects. They are investing in AI projects, and that's the problem why I don't find jobs. Like the shifting between the investment has gone like in a completely AI direction in the last 1 or 2 years.
I think that'll shift back though once it starts to balance out. Like for me, I reckon in the next couple of years or less, AI will become useful tools. It will become part of our pipelines. I remember being against like Substance Designer when it came out, and I was like, no, don't take away my Photoshop layering and my manual edits in Photoshop. I love it. That's my job. And I was kind of like, this procedural stuff's never going to work. clearly I was wrong, because that's actually really, really cool, and I got into it and really enjoyed using the tools. And I think the same is going to happen with AI. And because I've had that experience as an artist previously in my career, seeing this new technology come in that I was afraid of and didn't understand, to then see how that became useful, became part of everyone's pipeline, now is the default. So it's just going to happen again in a different form. So I'm not worried about AI. I still believe that you're going to need human input. You're going to need that human insight, as Chris mentioned, to be able to craft and be agile and create something fresh, even if it's not wholly innovative and new. And I think AI tooling can help facilitate that for smaller teams to do more. But if we're doing it for the sake of just doing more or higher fidelity, I think it'll fail either way, and it'll just become slop, and that is ultimately where it ends up. But for people who are job hunting at the moment, I think the challenge for everyone will be to, as I guess D3T had to do as a studio, is finding out, as you as a developer and an individual, what do you bring to a team? What particular skill sets do you have that others won't have that'll make you stand out from the crowd? But also, I'd say, where I was going with this train of thought when I started, is people are so used to chasing AAA companies. I'd almost say no anymore to chasing AAA. And it's like, there are great AA studios out there. There are great indie studios out there, that I think the industry is probably in a bit of a reset, where these bigger studios that we all aspired to and chased to get to are no longer around in the same way they were. Look at the way Ubisoft is split. Look at how a lot of those studios have changed, as an example. That I do feel the industry is shifting, where folks need to look at, where can I get employed to make games, and not necessarily chase particular studios like that. Obviously, some people, their aspiration will always be certain dream studios, and in that case, you know your path and you should keep doing that. But if folks just want to get back to work, I'd be looking at clarifying your offerings and then taking that to a wide variety of studios, and not just limiting yourself to certain options.
Yeah, I think the landscape has shifted quite a bit now.
Lots, I think.
With all the people are unemployed, I think you can't be in a situation where you can choose your studio. You need to take what you can get, I'd say, right? When I say, no, I want to work for Naughty Dog, and that could be a dream, but it's slightly not gonna happen, because like the people, so many people are unemployed these days.
I think it will be the birth of a new generation of great games, though, which I know sounds a bit weird, but
I hope so.
I feel like, they say like necessity is the mother of invention. Like, I feel like we've almost gone full circle in the industry, where back in the day, think of like the Spectrum days and stuff like that, where visual fidelity simply wasn't a thing. You all had the same level. Nobody knew what was going to come next, but you were all trying to make the coolest game. And then it became like, the 8-bit generation, the 16-bit generation, 32-bit. Then the companies started chasing the fidelity, and the games got a little bit less impressive. And I feel like we've constantly been on this sort of scale of constantly trying to look better. And then every now and again, you get a game that truly stands out as being great. But the majority of games would be kind of, middling, good to middling, And then you had like the Wii generation, for example, where there were some fantastic games, but boy, was there a lot of bloatware. There was a lot of stuff in between. I feel like we're at the stage now where we kind of need to sort of push our own boundaries to show what we creatives can do as humans who think and can come up with new things. And, for example, like, you don't get Hideo Kojima's or Sam Lake's through AI, AI generation stuff. That's not how that works, So I think, hopefully we do see this sort of generation of a bunch of new out there games. We've seen stuff like Blueprints and, as I said before, like Expedition 33 and that kind of stuff, or like Hades, all these big games that have come out. They're all in the awards charts and things, but they're all, AA studios or indie studios or whatever it might be. So I think it's time for them to shine. I think with a lot of people being out of work, or at least on shorter contracts or whatever it may be, it is a good time to sort of band together and see what they can do from the ground up. It's kind of like on the comedy circuits back in the day, when certain groups didn't feel represented, they start their own nights of that kind of comedy, and before you know it, that then blows up to its own industry or its own group of studios or whatever it might be. The same can happen for any industry. That's something I've been looking at, is like looking at other creative industries, seeing how they tackle things when when things change or, when things need to adapt. And that's normally what happens, is that people, through necessity, find alternative creative routes to do the same thing. And we don't know what they are now because they've not happened yet. But I think in 5 years' time, we can look back at a certain game or a certain point and say, okay, that's where things started to change. We just need that thing to happen.
Just have a question back to you two, actually, that just occurred to me while you were saying that, is the term AA, AAA, indie. Do you feel those labels still apply today? And as an added little bit, do you feel or agree with them being the cause of this chase for fidelity and everything else I'd almost see them as being the problem from my point of view, that like this whole idea of AAA, what does it even mean anymore to be AAA? Does that really apply? Especially like Expedition 33, you wouldn't call it AAA. Won a whole pile of awards and did really good and had great sales and revenue return. I'm like, can we just have great games instead? Can we just focus on maybe, because I think the focus is almost on these labels, and maybe that's where all this comes in from with the fidelity thing earlier, is it has to be AAA. So you have to have a certain fidelity. Where actually, does it really need to be that and be serviceable?
Kind of the burden of the label, right?
Already. Given how good the tech is, we just discussed Unreal 5 and everything else, even if it is abused, it is more possible now to make a game that looks great than it was when everyone did their own proprietary engines going back 10, 15 years ago. So if it was me, I'd almost say we could get rid of these labels completely, throw it all away, and focus on you just make great games. Like with movies, okay, I think independent will probably stay, because like with movies, you have your indie movies and your studio movies. Maybe that's all we need is that's a studio game, that's an indie game. That's it. Forget all the rest of it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the A's?
Yeah, hearing the label AAA, you already have a certain requirement when it comes to fidelity. It needs to be like hyper realistic. It needs to look a certain way. It needs to feel a certain way from a visual standpoint. It already has this. You slap those titles on it, and you already check your cross. You check you cross off the things off your list. What are the requirements? Yeah, Anthony, you're completely right with that. Yeah.
2026, throw it in the bin.
Honestly, it might be right. Like AAA, to me, it's the game equivalent of saying blockbuster movie. Like, you have a certain expectation. It's not going to be filmed, in a back garden on a handycam. It's going to be this IMAX experience, and that's kind of what AAA kind of entails, where it sets a certain level of expectation that it then has to try and hit. But then it does then bring in the appeal factor when it comes to like investment and that kind of stuff, where if you are saying that you're developing a AAA project and you've got the lineage to prove that you've done it before, you're going to do it again, that in itself kind of keeps that ball rolling. Whereas if you were to go to those same investors and saying you're doing an indie project, you're probably going to get turned away at the door. Even though there could be a better game, the point is that kind of previous title or that previous prestige isn't there. But like you said, I don't think it matters anymore, really, if it's something as AAA or AA or indie. I think so long as it's a good game, it's a good game. But the issue is that with these kind of titles on things, you then get the kind of the public sway based on it. So you get people who are for or against something purely because of a title. Before they've even seen the thing, they've got these certain expectations in their mind. And I think that's what needs to change first before we can change sort of categorizing these things, is actually changing the expectations from the sort of consumer side to just expect a good game. From my perspective, this past year, AAA has almost been like a burden to a certain degree. When you look at the games that are coming out or the games that get announced, like I mentioned before, Call of Duty and stuff, for example. I think that it's been a prime year for them. It was almost the downfall of the whole thing, because the way it's been, it wasn't very well received, and then I think it's because all this expectation was there. So year on year, it's been trying to improve and constantly update, but it just didn't hit the mark with all the players, which is kind of a shame, because from the trailer, I was actually a bit excited to play it because it looked like they had taken some bigger swings, some things they wouldn't normally do. I think it looked like they've taken inspiration from things like It Takes Two and that kind of stuff. Some sort of slightly weirder stuff happening, but it just didn't land with the audience. I think that's because they were trying out some AA or kind of more indie ideas in an expected AAA project, and it just didn't work out that way. So yeah, I think the sooner we can get rid of the. It's almost like music, like when you see bands come out and say, for example, like a band like Sleep Token. I don't know if you know about them, but they're classed as metal, but a lot of their songs are quite different kind of genres. You get bits of R&B and stuff in there. There's all sorts of stuff going on. And they're kind of almost genreless to a certain degree. And I really like that about them. I think games could do with a similar kind of thing, but rather than genre, it's a case of what category are they in, whether it's triple, double, indie.
Yeah, even like there was this like quadruple A game with Skull and Bones, which completely flopped, and it was not like it already with the quadruple A label, it already had this like
impossible bar.
Yeah, I can't believe someone used that. Do you know why they put quadruple A on that? I mean, I don't know why. Obviously, I reckon they put it on because that's how much money they spent, and they wanted to make themselves feel better, and they're like, let's just make it quadruple A. It's like, good job. That just means you blew your budget.
Yeah, exactly. The game was not even like no one took it like serious, because already with the label in mind, you were the expectation were so high that everyone knew they couldn't meet those. So it was doomed to fail from the beginning, right?
I think using that title is just proving that you care more about the money spent than the actual output of the product.
Yeah,
because they're just saying, look, we're throwing everything. It's a quadruple A title. Well, yeah, but is it good? It has
to be great.
Fun?
Yeah.
And do you know what's really going to hurt your brains?
Well,
when we discuss all this, and this is probably more going back to the art-centric stuff, when you discuss this kind of fidelity and super high fidelity graphics and all the rest of it, you look at what people are playing, i.e., I'm going to refer now more to, I'd say, the younger generation from like, we'd say 12 to 25. They're all playing
mobile games.
Yes, they're playing mobile games, they're playing Roblox, they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Counter-Strike, whatever. They're playing all these older games, and this is all backed up by the Steam replay stats. If you go back and look at that, if you look at what the graphics cards are for your highest percentage of Steam users, it's all below 20 series cards. That this is where I think the industry has completely got ahead of itself between hardware chasing of fidelity and all the rest of it versus the reality of what people are actually playing and spending money on. What like Repo and all these other games on Steam that are doing crazy numbers, and Peak, I think it's called, one kind of stylized, cool, anthropomorphic one where you climb in the mountain and stuff, kind of co-op game. That those experiences have hit really high expectations, revenue, and everything else, yet are very not necessarily low fidelity. They're just really well made, and they're focusing on cool gameplay mechanics and co-op gameplay and all the rest. And while we're all chasing pixels on a screen and extra detail and hardware pushing things to the limits, is that really the right direction to be going in?
No, exactly.
And that's where I'd criticize the entire industry for that. And be like, hey, can we just take stock of this again and really just sense check?
Out the player base.
But the player base is over here doing something completely different. And that's where I find it was interesting, your comments on the Call of Duty stuff, that I do wonder, and I didn't play it just for kind of getting it out there. Not yet anyway, the campaign and stuff, but I did watch some reviews and I'm aware of the kind of the way they told the story, and it was a bit mind-bending and different and whatever way that plays out. And for me, is that just too far for that fan base? Because obviously the Battlefield, from what I believe, has gone more realistic again and boots on the ground and more immersive, and maybe they just took a wrong turn based on the IP, not necessarily it's nothing got to do with technology. They might have just went too far with an IP and tried too hard.
They also did lean into a lot of AI stuff for like emblem making and stuff like that, so that also
I saw that.
So but I think it was a perfect storm really. But like what you're saying about the sort of the player base as well, we as an industry we have kind of almost not priced them out to a certain degree, but you know what I mean? Like you said, we've got to remember we're in a really tough time financially. We have been for years. I don't even
think it's pricing out. COD Warzone stuff you play for free. I think it's genuinely they just don't care.
Oh yeah, I mean
that's
the hardware.
Where,
if you make a game that only runs on a 50 series, you know.
But as we know, hardware prices might go up. And to be fair, I got a Switch 2 and it was not cheap.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
So I like Switches and I was just completely fascinated by the technology. But I do think that is something that's going to be a problem as well if all the hardware prices go up, which is why I think we're going to end up stuck longer in this generation than anyone predicted, which means we're going to either have to make better games or get really good at pushing the hardware and making the most out of it rather than just throwing everything and anything at it.
Yeah, I think there's still quite a bit of room for it. I mean, if you think, for example, the PS3, it had a lot of really nice looking things on it. And then like one of the last games was The Last of Us, and that really pushed everything like sort of as far as it could go, pretty much, and it was an amazing result because of it. I think we've still got some leg room to do that for the current generation. Whether it comes to being more efficient in how we're doing things, or just trying to focus more on making a shorter, more concise experience that is very, very enjoyable. But it's interesting though, because as you said, you get games like Roblox or things like Fortnite, which, Fortnite is kind of a constantly expanding thing. And for some kids or some people, it's the only game they play. But because that is constantly evolving, they're still technically playing a bunch of different games. It's just on the same platform. And it's
in Fortnite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's interesting, and you even get stuff like Unreal Engine for Fortnite now, which allows creators to make their own things within it. Which I really like that kind of thing, because that takes me back to the days when I used to mod Unreal Engine, I used to mod Unreal Tournament or Quake, that kind of things. The amount of people in this industry who got their start from doing mods or doing reskins or that kind of stuff, that's where the true kind of creativity and the true love for what you do comes from. It's not from making something look super realistic. It's from saying, can I do such a thing, and then trying to do it and achieving it and going, yes, I got it in the game, it looks good. That kind of feeling is now with this new generation because of stuff like Roblox or Fortnite. And then from there, it can only get better, because those systems are relatively limited when it comes to, Unreal for Fortnite, less so than Roblox Studio, but they're both fairly limited in the way. Like, for example, I've been playing with Roblox Studio a little bit recently just to see what it's all about, and it took me back to those days of first learning to use an engine, because it's so simplistic and it's so kind of broken down to these smaller sections, where nothing is done for you. It's like, okay, you want to do this, you got to learn to code. You want to do this, you got to learn to edit within the editor itself rather than outside. There's a whole bunch of things you can do, but it certainly rekindled a spark that I haven't seen for a while, almost like a student level spark, where, it took me back to my uni days of just trying to figure out how 3ds Max works, or, or how Unreal 2004 works. Like, it was a really, really interesting feeling.
Yeah, and that's actually something you obviously asked earlier, Christoph, about, like, sort of swing it back a little bit to art, but about like new tools and things that have developed. But I feel since Designer and Painter have come out, and normal maps became a thing. Other than Nanite, virtualized geometry, to use a more general term, to get out of that UE ecosystem, I don't think much has changed really since those particular. I mean, for you, like Christoph, in your work that you've been doing over the last kind of 18 months or a couple of years, has anything changed really? I mean, other than a few people adopting Blender, which I've done,
or plasticity,
but they're still modeling tools, and they're slightly faster because you do something slightly quicker and it's behind the scenes processing faster. But the actual fundamentals of creating primitives, bashing primitives together, cleaning up geometry, yes, some of the tooling around it has gotten a bit more efficient, but I don't think, and I think I'd say the path from your initial idea to final model is probably a bit faster than it used to be, just because of tools are a bit more streamlined and retopoing and processing all this stuff. Because I don't know if folks would remember the pain I had back in 2005 trying to make like a high-res gun in Max with no tooling whatsoever, and it's just like default Max, and you're just killing yourself trying to do it with modifiers and not break anything. So I think that's the only thing I can look back at my career and learning for the last 20 plus years and go, yeah, that stuff changed, but since then, I don't think there's been a big swing. And I'd asked this to the art team, I think it was Chris, during the summer. I'd actually questioned our art team internally and said, like, what do you all feel has changed over the last kind of 18 months in terms of tools or workflows or anything? And everyone kind of just went, not much. Marvelous Designer came out. That's been around a while. There's certain programs that are good for like speed tree for vegetation, clothing, and Marvelous Designer, but you can do some of that now in Blender with
Bevel Shader and Marmoset, I would say, was also
but that's limited because you can't do that in Engine. It becomes a limited thing for baking and whatnot. And but other than that, I mean, is there anything for either of you that you feel has popped up?
There is some bigger stuff coming or has just come out, which things like the Nanite foliage pipeline for Unreal 5.7, that's coming. That seems like quite a big I say change, it's basically speed tree within Unreal, but it allows you to then use the virtualized geometry.
I think the biggest thing in that is the voxelization to make it cheaper. That's basically, we're going to throw away all your trees and just have the first 5 in front of you, and that's why it's cheaper.
Well, yeah, it's true. But I mean, it's
smart though, because at a certain level, you have like a leaf per pixel, and once you get to that level, voxelization is the way to go, because then you have literally one voxel per pixel. You're done.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it almost takes you back to an older way of thinking. Like it's basically 3D pixel art at that point, which we're kind of going full circle again to going back to making things simpler to make them run on these newer technologies, which is like when we first started using nanite stuff and we're trying to figure out how to actually make it behave like we want it to. You end up almost like going back to vert painting, and stuff like that. Like it's really strange to kind of almost revert your skill set to the older version to do the things on the newer tools. But I think it's another reason why it's really important to try and maintain those foundational skill sets, because no matter what tooling comes out, if you don't have that in place, you can't use the new tooling to do what you want to do with it. You can only do what it's capable of doing.
And that's where I was kind of thinking with this kind of conversation topic is, have we not necessarily peaked with tooling, or has it peaked just because it does everything we need and we can get stuff out with it and we don't need more? Because remember, photogrammetry was a huge thing. Now it's just a step in, because at one point everyone was like, photogrammetry is the future, but actually no, just because it doesn't suit every game, right? Because you can't scan Metroid Prime, you can't scan it. It's not a scannable game.
No.
So for me, I think that's what I was. I mean, do you want to actually have another question in a second? Do you want to comment on this one, Christoph, first, about how do you feel tooling has evolved? And
I think as you already said, there are not that many like tools that have been industry changing that came into my workflow. Like baking in Paint or baking in Marmoset became a bit faster, but it's still like baking. It's nothing is really like has been a huge impact on how I do things.
Because that's a quality of life change, right? With the ability to paint SKU maps and stuff.
Yeah.
So actually, that's where, if you're older school, people remember you would have to make some adjustments to the model, i.e. adverts, or change something to be able to get better with the raycasting. But that knowledge is kind of going now, and people have forgotten it, because then if you just use a Marmoset, it's like, I'll just paint that thing out now, and it works. Because it's added in some divisions for the normals, and it's doing what you would have done manually. It's doing it behind the scenes to generate the data for you, and it's basically it's finessing that step where you're actually fundamentally doing the same thing, but the software is taking care of the bulk of it, and you just have to do a little paint some here, done.
I think
all of a sudden it works.
The next steps to me, now we've pretty much hit like peak fidelity, would be working on optimization. So that's why I am excited about stuff like that, the nanite foliage pipeline, because it's thinking about how can we run this more efficiently rather than how can we make it look better, because it looks the same as it did with the regular, nanite workflow or whatever workflow you were using at the time, except it's thinking about how can we make it more performant. I think that's where things are going to get interesting, because if things are more performant, you can put more in the game. That then opens a bit more creative freedom to do these more ambitious things that look a bit different, or might require more instances of things to be there, or whatever it might be. I think that's probably the next step: is how can we make this run better for the same amount of work?
Well, I think 60 FPS is still not a standard. Not that it needs to be for every game. I'd happily fight and die on that hill.
Yes,
but obviously some games are starting to hit 120 hertz. The killer for me is when the PS3 originally came out and was promising like 1080p 60 FPS, very few games could do it. Then the PS4 came out and it's like 2K gaming, push it, 60 FPS. Not many games could do it. And now we're at PS5 and it's like 8K gaming. Yeah, right.
It's even on the box. I saw it last week. I was cleaning up my room and I saw it on the box. 8K gaming.
8K gaming. And guess what we're not doing? We're barely... the actual native internal resolution coming out is not even 1440p in most cases. It's lower. So we're still at 1080p really.
Like upscaling.
And then it's upscaling. And that's not necessarily the best image quality and the best thing we can do. So for me, at a super high level, if I was like an art director on a project, it's like, let's get the highest internal resolution possible. Let's aim for 60 at a good high fidelity, and then let upscaling have a bit less work to do. And that gives you more control over the final image, which give a nicer presentation for people. And to be fair, I played Assassin's Creed Shadows when I first got my 4K TV. I've literally only got a 4K TV this year because I'm one of those people. And it was amazing to see Assassin's Creed Shadows at obviously upscaled 4K, but it was quite impressive. It was like, okay, I get it. This is cool. I like it.
Yeah, it's a
HDR,
cool game.
wow, my
It's a
eyes.
beautiful game.
It's a beautiful game.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff in it, yes, it's using virtualized geometry, but it's not like super dense. If you watch any behind the scenes stuff, or if you stop and look at any of the assets, they haven't gone insane. Where people who use Unreal, it's like, oh, ZBrush model, chuck it in. They didn't do that with Assassin's Creed Shadows. And Assassin's Creed Shadows, yes, with some technical levers pulled, actually looks quite good on Switch too. So I think if I had to pull out an example for this year of a game that used the tech, did a great job, made a great game, and serviced all platforms, it probably would be Assassin's Creed Shadows. So there you go. That's my vote for this year in terms of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's done the full gamut, right? It's on everything from a Switch 2 right through to high-end PC. And it's good across all platforms and consistent. And it's a good gaming experience, and it's visually cool.
What was your game of the year when it comes to like fun, and what really got you, like, I don't want to say addicted, but what kept you?
Wow, it's actually the same as last year, because I'm still playing Space Marine 2 with people every week. Yeah, I'm still playing that. So actually, there's been no new game. I've managed to play. I'm bouncing in between Darktide and Space Marine 2, and this is where it goes back to the comment earlier that not everyone's playing new games right now, and that's where the industry needs to realize what's happening. That for me, this year has been very much Space Marine 2 and Darktide, but recently been playing Killing Floor 3. That's the current one this week. Played Deep Rock Galactic. Played a bunch of stuff like multiplayer, but single player wise, I actually finished Mario Odyssey. Considering I bought that when the Switch first came out, I only finished it about 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, that's just my that's my horrifically bad gaming. My kids finished it before I did.
But it's a good game, right?
But yes, and that was an interesting one for me because I'd stopped it near the last few kingdoms, and then I'd left it for years, and then I had a day off a few weeks back after a busy period at work, and I was like, right, I sat down on the Friday, grabbed a cup of tea, grabbed some snacks, and I said, I am not leaving this chair until I finish this damn game, because it's just been sitting there looking at me for years, and I was adamant it's not going into 2026. So I sat there and did it, and I loved it. It was really, really good. And that's when I realized, like, we don't need Hyperdrive, we don't need all this stuff. No. So this is just a well-made game, which, because it brought me back to my nostalgic moment playing Mario 64 before I got into game dev and even decided to work in game dev. That owning Mario 64 when it came out, I lost so many days and hours in that game, just running around, having fun, trying things out, finding all the stars, doing everything you needed to do. Like, it was just, kind of reminded me.
Was magic back then.
Yeah, and Ocarina of Time as well. And I think for me, I'm kind of guilty of it, that as you go through the industry and you rise up through the ranks, it becomes more about getting stuff done on time and making sure the team is effective, making sure everything's the quality, and your mind is in 101 different places, that you fail to stop and look at it and go, is it a good game? And that's why I keep saying it, because for me, it's been a learning over the last kind of year and a bit, that every project I've been on, because obviously with CodeV, we kind of work on multiple, I've been that voice in the room with all the clients going, putting your hand up going, but is it a good game? Or critiquing stuff and asking questions leading to that point to make the team become self-aware and go, actually, yeah. Because a lot of teams just get so blinkered on trying to fix this piece of tech or make this thing look amazing or find this process because we have to refactor 500 meshes. We need to tool that up. Like, the focus is in all these different places for production reasons, and people lose sight on actually just getting the game fun. And that's probably another little tangent I'll throw out there and then run away, because every producer in the world's about to hate me. But I do think games have become overproduced, and I do think
so many games are out there. And
yes, and I think, obviously people who work in game dev will be aware of this, and people who don't won't be. But before, when teams were about 100 and 150 people, you could deal with a lot one-to-one. Once you break the 150 mark, and especially go into the hundreds, if not thousands, in some projects when it gets really big, I understand the need for production, because you need producers to help do it. And we've worked with some great producers across clients and with our own teams. So this is not me picking at production in that sense, because they're actually crucial to get stuff out the door in one piece. But at the same time, I have noticed a deference, if you will, for focus towards production velocity and hitting milestones, and this is not necessarily aligned with just pausing for a minute and asking, is it a good game? Because a producer's job is to keep the train moving and hit the station on time. it's not necessarily to assess was it a comfortable journey and would someone do it again. So it's very interesting other take from a high level, but
yeah, I also I love high fidelity games.
We all do. We're visual
I
people.
all played the PlayStation exclusives. Ghost of Tsushima, Horizon, Uncharted, Last of Us. But my game of the year has been Balatro. It's I was a bit late to the party, I just it made something with me. I just kept on playing. One more round.
That's
one
great.
More run. It was But I also loved Indiana Jones this year. It was a really cool game. I'm a Machine Games fan. I always support them as much as I can because I like Wolfenstein, and I wanna see them make another one, and that's why I also support them on Indiana Jones. It's a cool franchise.
Yeah, I need to finish that, but it looked amazing because I started that last Christmas with the intent to finish it, and I failed.
Yeah.
So here's hoping another couple of days of work, and then I'll have some free time again. I'm going to try and get my time in Indiana Jones to get it done.
Nice.
I mean, were there any other? Yeah.
Well, for me, I think Game of the Year for me is probably sick of hearing it by now, but Claire Obscure, I played the hell out of it. But it also inspired me to sort of try out some new things, and try and also learn French, weirdly. There's a lot of sort of French adjacent stuff happening in it, and it was attractive to sort of go and try and learn a bit. But also, as well as that, I've been playing Death Stranding 2, for example. I'm a massive Hideo Kojima fan, so it was great to get back into that world, and I love that it's kind of just a continuation of the first, in a sense. It's a little, I think it's a little easier, so you can enjoy the world a bit more. But I like just getting in there, putting on the music on the car radio, and just driving around, creating roads. That's kind of just my thing at the moment, and it's a nice way to unwind after work, just because it doesn't take a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of enjoyment. But also, like yourself, Balatro. Again, like you, I only sort of discovered it this year, as it were. I think it came on Game Pass or something, and I was watching something else, and I thought, I'll just play Balatro at the same time. And it became almost like a nightly tradition of just see what I can do. And I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy it. But then also, weirdly, I've jumped back onto the PS3 in the past couple of months. I've been playing Final Fantasy 13 again, because I remember I got stuck on a boss after about 12 hours in, and I never went back to it. And I couldn't just go back to that save. But I checked, and my save was from 2014. So it's been a minute. So I just restarted the game from a new save slot. And I've been really enjoying that, getting back to that kind of older game, because it still looks pretty good, but fidelity-wise doesn't really matter because the gameplay, I know at the time it got a bit of flack for the kind of gameplay because it was so different to things before it, but I quite enjoy the system that it has in place and trying to learn to adapt to it because it's not like anything else I've played. It's got its own unique vibe to it, and it's great. And also, playing a game from that kind of generation, you forget how much of a game they feel like. And if that makes sense, it's not a bad thing that it feels like you're playing a game. It's kind of a feeling that I almost crave. Like what Andy was saying before about Super Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time. When you play them, you can straight away feel that nostalgia of sitting there playing a video game. Whereas when you're playing something like one of the more modern titles, you kind of tend to remember what you're seeing and what's happening rather than the fact that you're playing the game. I don't know about you guys, but I've got into a game before so much that when I then think back on the game, it's almost like I'm remembering it from the character's POV, rather than the fact that I was playing it. It's like almost remembering things that have happened from that character's POV, and I think it's quite interesting. But yeah, it's been a lot this year.
Do you reckon?
Also sorry,
no, you go.
Anthony, go ahead.
You go.
Also with the big open world games and the Ubisoft titles and Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, all these games have become more of they feel more like work and not like playing a video game anymore.
Boxes.
So I like that. I like to explore stuff. I like to explore the map. I like to the question marks and unlock the question marks. But still, it's completely different to the playing a video game feeling, as you said it. Yeah, but it's still a game. But yeah, it's not in the same range as like playing a game.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, as a game artist, from point of view from both of you, that you find you play older games or have a kind of desire to go play older games, so you don't have to compare work you're doing during the day to what just came out. You have that kind of separation, because that's the issue. You know about you guys, if you're a game developer and you're actively working on projects like right now, and then something comes out and it's like it's the next high fidelity watermark of a game, which is exactly what we've just been complaining about the last hour. But then you play it and you can't help yourself but compare. You're like, oh, we did this, oh, we use this technique, and it kind of almost ruins the experience. That I tend to drift back to these older games because it's more pure, and I can just turn off that part of my brain.
But it's funny, because we've been doing this for a while now, sometimes I can actually look back at older games that I'm playing and I can see them, I can feel the nostalgia from a dev's point of view as well.
Like yes, you can really understand how it's made.
And, I'll be playing stuff and I'm like, God, I miss trim sheets. You know, like just something like that. When you're playing something, there's certain projects that just don't use that kind of technique anymore, or whatever it might be. And it kind of takes you back to the days of, I love all the new technology that we have, and it's great being able to use virtualized geometry and all that kind of stuff, and Lumen and those kind of systems. They look fantastic, but sometimes I just want something to look like the things I used to make, I want to use the same processes that I used to use. And I realize it's like old man yells at cloud situation, but it's, you just get that sometimes where you're like, can we come off the gas a little bit just for a minute? Let us enjoy the process, and then we can get back to trying to make it really fast.
I was listening to a podcast lately, and there was a guy saying, why do we always need to change things that are working? Like, there is an app and they are changing the interface again to look even more futuristic, and it was working before. Why did they rearrange the buttons? Like Spotify is a good example. Why do they change things that were just fine and working? It's a bit like the same for video game, but maybe that's like, then you can open up a bigger question. Is it part of the capitalism, and things need to grow and everything needs to...
That is a pet peeve for me, though. Like, things changing for the sake of change is so frustrating.
Exactly.
Like, I used to, even with the way things work these days when it comes to things like subscription models, like why is everything a subscription model? Why can I not just buy Maya 25 and use that for 6 years? Like it worked in the past. I don't want to pay monthly for something like, Photoshop, for example.
Reoccurring revenue.
Yeah, like I was using CS2 for 9 years, probably, for personal work. Obviously, I wouldn't use it in the studio for that long. But I mean, like, I wish I could just have the option to say, I'm just going to, I'll buy it now. I'll use it for as long as I can afford to, or I need to. And then I'll upgrade when I feel like it's time to upgrade. Whereas now it's like, I want to use some software. Okay, well, that'll be £40 a month. Like, well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I kind of dislike that as a barrier for... I mean, in a weird way, it's good for students in terms of people like trying to get into the industry to have a subscription model, because when I was trying to get into the industry, you either had to get a piracy version, or
like
it cost 10 to 12,000 for Maya, and it was insane prices. So I'm kind of pro that model, but I think it just has to be heavily reduced for students and others to give them the opportunity and affordance to be able to learn, and not at a crazy cost.
Well, they used to do learning editions of stuff, which I think was probably a better way of
that's drifted away now.
Because just having a slightly reduced tool set, like nothing crazy. Like, for example, Maya used to be able to get the, was it the PLE, the Personal Learning Edition, I think it was called?
Yes.
And it was like, it had pretty much the full suite of stuff. I think there was a couple of the more specific things left out. And then the only downside was that your renders would have a watermark on them, because it's intended to be a tool to learn how to use it. But that was free. As same with like things like Photoshop Express. I don't know if that still exists anymore, but that used to be like a reduced version of Photoshop.
Showing your age now.
Well, yeah, I know, right? Don't make me talk about Paintshop Pro.
Photoshop, what now?
I will talk about TrueSpace and Paintshop Pro if you want me
to. Because one for Christoph is, how do you feel Game Art's been this year? What were like the standout things you've observed, or what are you going to basically look back on 2025 in terms of Game Art and go, this was a thing, good or bad?
Yeah, so one thing I saw is, like, as I already mentioned, the Marmoset Bevel shader that is like really giving especially for small little props, it's like really ditching the whole high poly process. Which is kind of a cool thing. I always liked high polys. I always liked like Boolean stuff, but that's something I see really for the future, like being a thing. Maybe you need to be able to control the edge width more, because you want to have different edge width on different edges. But that's like that's like a technique I saw in the last year that really got through the roof, and I saw so many cool things happening with it. And yeah, that's for me from a hard surface prop perspective. That's like the biggest improvement from a workflow or tool perspective. Yeah.
And then from game art in general, I mean, for me, I think what I like this year is obviously games like Swords of the Sea, ones that have quite a strong visual style and direction. I think there's been, well, my observation anyway, there's been a shift away from hyperrealism, despite all of our talk about it, that I'm noticing less and less games now actually chase, which I think is a good trend to me that I'm seeing, that more and more games have come out this year who are leaning back towards just good art direction and the fidelity they need rather than something beyond. No one's trying to impress with visuals anymore. And even looking at like the Game Awards trailers and stuff that come out, there's few on there that are like super high fidelity, realistic. Quite a lot of them were kind of pitching at a fair level and just looked awesome and very exciting. And I think I want to see more of that. And that's one of the things this year that I quite liked.
As I'm still like in the whole weapon art bubble, things are still pretty high, super realistic. Because there are guys out there that are like really pushing bending the, as I said, the limits of hyperrealism, and there are artists out there who are such a great, they really nail like hyperrealism to as high as it can get these days. So
what's after that? That's the next question.
That's the next question.
Like, where is the peak? Because you're going to get diminishing returns, right?
Will there be a peak?
I think the peak's already been hit, if you ask me.
Yeah,
I've seen some weapons, go on ArtStation and look, and some of them are so good. They're, again, it's hyperrealism, like they're better than life. And to me, it's like, if it's already better than what life can offer, in reality, where are you going to go from there? And a lot of it doesn't even run on consoles. Then just like
that's the other thing. Yeah, that's also something I saw when we were interviewing people at Romero Games, and there were artists who had fantastic portfolios,
of
like
course,
super high realistic weapons.
Yep.
But when we asked them how they made them and how they structured the textile density, the texture sets. Yeah, there were weapons with 12 or 16 UDIMs texture sets, and this is not like applicable for.
But that's movie production. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd argue it is still applicable in a way, because obviously, as you and I will both know, that if there's 16 UDIMs, you can easily cut it down to 4, shift all your UVs around, and just have a lower TD that's fair for what we need to ship on. So it's not impossible for people like that to get there, but it is a fundamental piece of learning that you could aim way too high and then you're not fit for that job then, because they need someone who can come in now and just do what's required rather than do the nth degree. But one day that could become the norm and that person to be laughing at everybody else. But to me, whether someone's I'd rather someone who can do amazing work with 4 UDIMs or 4 texture sets, whatever you want to describe it, rather than 16, because if they can do that, they could probably do 16, but 16 can't necessarily do 4.
Exactly.
It becomes a bit of a challenge.
That's the difference between artistry and production artistry, isn't it? They're two very different things, and I think a lot of people who are sort of just starting out don't really fully grasp that your portfolio shouldn't just be a showcase of nothing but beauty shots. It should be a showcase of beauty shots as well as production.
It's breakdowns, and especially in a world of AI, I think it's more important to have breakdowns. I would argue, because me now as an art director, looking at hiring people again in the future, I'm going to be checking those receipts, as you mentioned. I will be checking breakdowns, especially on the concept art side, maybe less so on the 3D side. But with Mesh.ai and all these other tools coming in, everyone's going to have to be more diligent on who they hire, because if you're hiring someone for the 3D modeling skills, you're not going to be paying for a license for them to do it with Mesh AI, because that won't facilitate every single use case. If you're working on a brand new IP with unique designs or art style, you can't just feed that into the system. You can't just submit that into an AI database, because you will be in severe trouble from clients for giving away their IP and their details. So that's where I think AI kind of fails a little bit, because while all these companies are using it, I won't name any publishers, but just think of a big game company or a publisher. And if you imagine that, I'm going to go with Microsoft, screw it. If you think of the likes of Microsoft, right, and they've heavily invested in AI. So I'm picking someone who's heavily invested in AI
Yeah.
How comfortable would they feel if one of their own IPs with unique art style, unique stuff, would they feed it back into their own system for everyone else to use? Question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where I could see that production conversation coming up where they're like, oh no, definitely use AI, but don't put our data in there. And to me, that's a conflict then, because you can't be both. You can't be pro AI and then not want to put your content in there, because that to me creates that means there's a problem that people aren't discussing.
Mm.
And I'd be interested to see how all that resolves. But yeah, for future people doing portfolios, it's all about the breakdowns. Yes, hitting a high fidelity is cool.
Yeah.
I think you should always have one piece that probably does do that, just to show you can.
Yeah.
But you always
you
need... It's always game ready stuff, whatever that means in the generation you're applying.
Show UVs, show high poly, show your low poly, show wireframes.
Show it in
the same story. Yeah.
Hey, the skill to ship games is a dying skill, and I think a lot more people need to get it back.
Absolutely.
That's another problem with the industry we didn't touch on, is I mentioned it earlier on, with dev cycles now taking more like 5 to 8 years rather than 3 to 5. I'm not fully convinced that's purely down to fidelity alone. I genuinely think there's an element of companies have gotten too big, too much design by committee, not enough creatives in control, overproduce, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
There's too much of the machine leading the process rather than developers finding the fun and developing it like used to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of pleasing shareholders rather than making a good game. I think that's kind of
a little bit, not in every case, but I definitely think,
but it's definitely more than it used to be.
Yeah, it's got, when the numbers have grown and teams have gotten bigger and budgets have gotten bigger, I'm not necessarily convinced more work is done. Basically, from everything I've observed, I really feel all that money and investment is just keeping the machine moving, and it's not necessarily the most efficient, best way to do something. And I don't know what your experience is like, Christoph, but I know me and Chris would probably align, having worked together for the last few years with D3T, would know projects we've worked on inevitably cut X amount of content due to timelines, costs, scope, whatever else. And in a lot of situations, it's like you could have just not. If you actually slowed down at the beginning, found the core gameplay loop first, found the fun, worked on the scope, you probably would have cut 50% less than what you cut, because you wouldn't have scoped it there in the first place because of ambition and trying to please stakeholders. And your game must be 50 hours long because that's what the data says this year. But this game doesn't need to be 50 hours long because we're doing this kind of genre. And it's just, doesn't help.
Yeah, it's maybe, to break it down in a sentence, it's maybe the biggest issue is people who don't know anything about game dev are making the decisions about game dev.
Yes,
they're making the big higher level decisions that affect all the levels down dramatically.
Basically 2026, I want to see creatives take control again. I want to see, and that's Claire Obscura as a good example of that, where creatives had control again. And I think that's what needs to happen, basically, is companies need to trust creatives to make those decisions, work with them. I'm not even saying cut out shareholders and execs or C-suite people. Work with
Keep
them
in the loop,
educate them.
Explain stuff, show them stuff, how you got there, why this decision makes that sense.
Because if those people had more insight into how the sausage is made and why, they'd have more reason to be invested in it rather than just say, oh, this isn't done great, shut it down. Like that's not how it works, You wouldn't just stop making a cake halfway through because you realised it was more expensive than you thought it'd be. You'd let it finish, it's just daft.
And then eat more cake.
Exactly.
I do think, the industry in general has become too greedy, for the want of a better word, too focused on financials, too focused on growth and revenue, and not enough focus on what made the industry great in the first place, which, after all, this is art. Yes, it is commercial art, but it is a creative space, and this industry grew from creative minds who loved technology, loved creativity, and built experiences for people to enjoy. It somehow, since the kind of 60s, 70s, and 80s to now, has just become this big corporate investment world where it's lost a lot of its charm in that sense, and it's become more about, as I mentioned, getting things done on time, getting massive amounts of revenue and orders of magnitude higher each time. And the focus is there, hence the chase for fidelity, chase for buzzwords, chase for technology, rather than the ultimate focus, which should be, why am I making this game? What do I want people to experience? What does it bring to the world? Because it should always bring joy or interest or something to satisfy someone's needs or give them a bit of escapism. And if you're not answering those questions correctly, it should probably just not go ahead. But it's hard to say that when you have the financial machine behind you, throwing money at you and telling you to run, go faster, go more, need to make profit.
Corona maybe was like COVID was maybe a blessing and a curse at the same time, because on one side, people
it
like
caused part of this with the big bubble and more investment, and I think that was
definitely but also on the other side, like it would be interesting to see how the games industry would have like
evolved,
behaved,
or
evolved if this like the disease would not have been there. But that's a bigger picture.
And is there anything on your question list we've not touched upon, or because I'm obviously conscious of time is running out?
No, I think we already we handled quite everything super well. So I'm super happy with this episode. It was again a pleasure to speak with you guys.
And I throw back to the audience at this point and tell people to ask questions, right? It's always good to see feedback from people, and what do people want to know more about within the games industry, and what topics do people want to see discussed. It'll be very interesting to figure out.
We can definitely do that again in the future. I'm super happy to have this recording with you guys. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Anthony. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a good start of the new year. And I think we can wrap it up now.
Cool. Yeah, you too. Thank you very much.
And I do hope, as the leaving message last time was to focus more on the craft and just make good art. Let's just keep that going for 2026 as well, people.
Again.
Yeah, I think we're not there yet. I think people need to
even more craft.
Keep your creativity alive, folks.
Yeah,
I think it's happiness. Like, don't let AI and all these things burn you down. Don't let all the scaremongering and clickbait and all that stuff, which you can get very overwhelming. And I'm actually, one thing we didn't discuss was the amount of people who are aspirationally trying to get into the industry. How many people have decided not to in 2025? And I don't even want to know the answer to that. That scares me, because I think the answer to that could be quite shocking. How many people have tried, studied, and failed to get in at the moment, and instead of sticking with it, we'll probably bow out and we'd never get great people into the industry. And that's a whole other topic for maybe a new video in the new year. Who knows?
Yeah, hopefully for 2026, people do continue, because you need to remember the only way to guarantee failure is by giving up.
Yeah, I'd agree. True. And the whole AI thing will settle. Things will change. The industry will reset itself. I think we're in a natural realignment phase due to the boom of COVID and all this crazy investment kind of coming and going. And we're at the whim of a lot of this financial stuff at the moment. But I do think that reset's happening, where these smaller studios are coming up and stuff is balancing out, and the industry is being reshaped as we speak. And it will do over the next 6 months to a year. And I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Same. Absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for inviting us.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.